Hi, just before we begin, I want to state that this video will contain spoilers for the following manga and anime. If you have any interest in reading or watching any of these series beforehand, I really do recommend you do so before watching this video, although I will try to keep spoilers to a minimum. So the other day, one of my best friends asked me to recommend a good action manga to read. Now I pride myself on reading every form of slot possible that I can find on manga sites, so I had a couple of solid recommendations. But I ran into a slight issue. Action manga is a bit of a broad term. Since any series that includes a punch or two will add action into its genre tags to get a couple of more viewers, the alignment chart for what counts as an action manga is a bit difficult to pin down. Also, in my opinion, action doesn't always have to mean a straight fist fight. I think the amazing race scenes in Initial D, the unnecessarily hype moments of sports manga like Kuroko no Basket or Blue Lock, and the high-intensity gambling scenes of manga like Kaiji and Akagi contain far more heart-pumping action than most of the power fantasy garbage you'll find out in the wilds. It was also important that my recommendation didn't require too much build-up. I think the only time you can recommend a slow-burned action series is when someone specifically asks for something long-term. One Piece is a great series, but unless someone told me that they had a week or three to burn, I wouldn't recommend it. Also, quick note, I'm specifically judging manga here. If I was to introduce something like Jujutsu Kaisen, I'd do it specifically with the manga in mind, not the anime. So, I set up some rules for my recommendations. Number 1. There must be some underlying story in the series, but it should prioritize the action of the series first and foremost. So this was mostly just to prevent series that added action just for capstone moments in their arcs to be included on this list. I really didn't feel like going through a lot of political scheming and moral debates that would just end off with a big fight just because it needed something. I wanted a series where action was the foundation of the story. Of course, that doesn't mean a story could be disregarded entirely. Violence without reason or motivation becomes very boring very quickly. In the end, there should be a reason to root for the characters in an action manga. Now, for example, I care about Michael Kaiser from Blue Lock because his story arc of going from a king who is actually scared of losing his crown to a mongrel that is willing to leverage everything in order to score a goal is actually somewhat compelling, along with, the rest of his backstory. Conversely, no matter how cool it might look, I really didn't have any emotional investment in about half the fights in Tougen Anki because the characters who are fighting have very bare-bone reasons for doing so. So in the end, there must be some compelling story, although I suppose how compelling a story is may be a tad subjective. Number 2, the fight should not always be predictable from the beginning of the fight. So this is more of a personal issue of mine, but any action manga that stars the main protagonist in a majority of its fights loses a bit of steam, since I kind of know the protagonist will never really lose. It doesn't really matter if the enemy is supposed to be categorically better than them, the story has to bend in some manner to let our protagonist win. I don't count series where the protagonist is made overpowered on purpose to be a violation of this rule. I still think One Punch Man is a great series, just don't look too hard at the season 3 animation. It's not a great series just because Saitama one-shots everything, but also because of the interactions that he has with the side characters, and those side characters can be genuinely amazing, and their fights are sometimes even more entertaining than Saitama's. And of course, while we know that Saitama will always win, we don't know if Genos will. Actually, we kind of know that he's going to lose every fight, or if any of the other top heroes will. But on the other side, for example, are you ever really worried that any of the side characters in My Hero Academia are ever really going to lose their fights? I guess you can't really call them side characters, but for example, like even that one part when you thought that Bakugo might actually die, it's resolved so quickly that I kind of felt cheated. I'm not saying that a story trying to manipulate you is a bad thing, but when it does it so cheaply, you feel more insulted than anything else. My main point being that your main character shouldn't be expected to win every fight they go into, or else it's going to feel really lackluster. Or you can have your side characters be involved a lot more, and they have a reasonable chance of either failing at their task and their actions actually having consequences. Number 3, the action actually has to be good and it has to be hype. Action is a bit of a broad term, but that doesn't mean it's all the same. Paneling and choreography matters a lot. An action scene in a manga feels good when they communicate proper weight through their movement and attacks. If a manga simply has their characters taking turns throwing their strongest attacks, like it's a Pokémon game, then I would qualify that as a bad action sequence. And of course, there has to be hype moments. Love it or hate it, single manga panels can convince a potential reader to pick up a series. We want to know what builds up to this amazing frame, we want to know what happens afterwards, we want others to see it, since if it becomes popular enough, then we might even get to see it animated. Admittedly, this criterion is a bit more subjective than I would like, but these parameters are more to filter out the chaff than anything else. So, after considering my very well built criteria, I settled on 3 solid recommendations for my friend. Number 1, Sakamoto Days. Number 2, Rose Garden Saga. And number 3, my final recommendation, and the one I want to sell you on today, is, drumrolls please, Tenkaichi, the Greatest Warrior Under the Rising Sun. Written by Yosuke Nakamura and illustrated by Kyotaro Azuma, the story is set in a fictional Japan where Oda Nobunaga has unified Japan and survived until 1600 AD. The story begins with the aforementioned Demon King of the Sixth Heaven stating that his empire will only pass to the one who brings him the greatest warrior, the number one under the heaven, the Tenkaichi. Of course, the only way to prove that they brought the greatest warrior is have these monsters battle it out in a classic tournament arc fashion, where death is the only outcome for the loser. Right off the bat, this is great. A very solid premise that gives a clear goal as to why everyone is risking their lives in such a tournament. The prize of being crowned the next Emperor of Japan makes it reasonable as to why all these important figures would scour the land for the best warriors possible. The hard location and time of the tournament means that the list of fighters has to include a lot more Japanese local legends, since it would be difficult to find someone overseas, test them, and then bring them back to Japan. And while each fighter might have their own personal motivations, the extra boon of having your sponsor be the next emperor of a unified Japan means there is at least a common reason for all these fighters to have gathered. Also, the fact that the motivation for the entire tournament is finding the greatest warrior, combatants can't bring unilaterally unfair equipment. This is why, despite guns technically still existing in this timeline, the fighters don't get to use them or any other type of crazy weapon. Because obviously, Nobunaga is not going to give away his entire empire to someone who only won because they had a gun. The tournament structure is also perfect because it requires the winners to fight again. Therefore, fights have to consider future matches. A fighter can't do some crazy move that can only be done once in their lifetime, or give up a couple of limbs to win the fight, because until the very last battle, they have to keep fighting. Sure, they get to rest in between those fights, but it doesn't change the fact that those kinds of decisions play a part in the story. Also, the tournament structure means that we will get an evolving fighting style from the winners of each fight. As of writing the script, the series is at the last fight of the first round of battles, so we don't know how much time there'll be until the second round begins, or how the author intends to power up their characters. But the tournament arc at least forces there to be some kind of development for these winners. You can't be a one-trick pony. Since all the matches are public, your future potential opponents are looking at you as you fight. Even if you do win, showing too much might mean you have no future cards to play. It'll be interesting to see whether the fighters adapt to strengthen their core skills or act to shore up their weaknesses. There are definitely some characters that would benefit from a more varied arsenal, but that's what makes tournament arcs so fun. The characters have to take what they've learned from their previous fights and use it to grow going forward. My one gripe with their system is that I wish the second round of fights were randomized after the first round was completed, since we technically already know the matchups of the second round. I just think a little bit of mystery might have helped spice up the story. Anyway, cool. The motivations and the premise are solid. But what about the predictability of the fights? I want to draw your attention to a translated tweet from Tenkaichi's editor. I might get scolded for telling you this, but before a battle begins in Tenkaichi, it has not been decided who will win. What is Tenkaichi? It's a manga set up in a what-if scenario about a battle tournament between 16 warriors trying to take over the Japan that Oda Nobunaga had unified. So how does it work? How is victory or defeat decided? I'll tell you. Number 1, there's a meeting before the match. There we discuss the personalities, abilities, backgrounds, etc. of the contestants based on the materials provided by Kazubobu Goto, a collaborator. Number 2, when the battle begins, they come up with ideas to showcase this martial artist is strong like this. If it looks good, I ask them to include it in the chapter as much as possible. Number 3, win-loss decision. It's usually decided at the meeting that takes place 1 or 2 chapters before the end of the fight. We take into consideration the previous draft, the unpublished manuscript, and the potential trump cards of each fight. Then, the winner and loser are chosen. Since we all love battle manga, the winners are decided by a consensus between Nakamura-sensei, Azuma-sensei, and me, Yamanaka. There are no speculation like, let's have this one win to betray the reader's expectations, or this one is the secret protagonist so they'll win. It's just as simple as the one who gets the most overall votes between us, the 3 battle manga fans, wins. I guess you could say the same earnest fight as in the martial arts tournament is happening within the framework of the manga. So, please refrain from spoiling the winners and losers as it could be very harmful to our work. Tenkaichi doesn't have a designated protagonist. Enemies, allies, there are no sides. That's why the manga is completely free of narrative tropes such as justice prevails and the promise of the story, a battle tournament in which not even the creators can predict the outcome. Hi, quick note, while editing this, I wanted to check the source of this translated tweet. I got it from the end of chapter 12 where the Scanlation group posted the whole text. But they didn't provide a link for the tweet and I couldn't find the editor's Twitter/X handle anywhere through my own research, so I can't provide the original tweet, but no one seems to have contested its validity yet. I do feel a little bad providing unsubstantiated evidence, but I'll place trust in the person /people translating the series. But yes, I can't provide a source, my apologies. Now I know this could just be a method of generating more hype for the series. It isn't unbelievable to say that such a statement was made in order to draw in more attention, but I can't help but be excited to know that my favorites could win, despite them not being the typical protagonist archetype. Actually, it's a bit difficult for me to say even that, because true to their word, the series genuinely does try to make every combatant feel like a proper protagonist of their own story, and I felt that their battles could actually swing either way. With the exception of one, I would have bet half my organs that William Adams was getting cooked after seeing that he was facing against Yagu Munenori. My favorites just happen to be slightly less protagonist-like than other protagonist-like characters that exist in the story, I guess. Whether it be like the badass normal character of Hayashizaki's Jinsuke, or the combat pragmatist of Hattori Hanzo. They're just not typically the character that'll make it to the end of a battle tournament manga. Especially when they're against way more popular characters like the aforementioned Yagu Munenori, Miyamoto Musashi, and Sasaki Kojiro, which I actually suppose owes a lot of their fame to Fate Grand Order now that I think about it. But I'm just saying that if this whole series isn't a simple popularity contest, then my boys actually have a chance of taking it home. Of the 8 fights that have occurred as of making this video, I've only predicted 5 of them correctly, so I was given quite a few surprises, and even the ones where I was correct, I was quite convinced that it could go either way. So in terms of keeping its readers on their toes, Tenkaichi does a great job in that aspect. But now, the final and arguably most important criteria, because for most people, myself included, so long as the manga looks and feels good, we can swallow down a lot of mediocrity. So, how is the action? Genuinely amazing. Whether you're looking for faster paced fights between 2 speed-based characters, or heavy trades between powerhouses, Tenkaichi delivers on nearly every end. I suppose you could say their ranged combat is lacking, but that's kind of the point of tournaments like this. We want to see close-up violence, snipers no sniping. And the choreography, it is amazing, but it also tries its best not to become incomprehensible noise. As flashy as the characters get, there is always a reason or explanation as to why they're doing what they're doing. They're very clearly dodging attack, they're clearly getting space because they're wary of what the enemy might do. They've stopped moving because they're trying to read what the enemy is doing. It's great to be able to see action and think to yourself, oh yeah, that makes sense. Maybe it's not the best possible action, but isn't nonsensical. And further to that, the abilities that the characters have, while absurd at times, generally have an explanation. Of course, some of them are the more plain, like God-given strength or God-given talent, but others have an interesting idea that is tied to their character and has reasonable counters. For example, in the fight between Togo Shigekata and Yasuke, Togo's strike had been previously established to cut through steel armor like it's nothing. So, when the first blow is to be exchanged, we're all left wondering how Yasuke is going to deal with it. The trick he employs isn't some shield that can simply tank the blow, or some physique that lets him dodge it. It's actually a skill that is shown very briefly just before the fight. Here, Yasuke was able to catch a blade strike without any prior warning. If you look at the panel carefully, you'll see that he catches it just before the downswing. Theoretically, by stepping in early, he is essentially grabbing a blade that's still in its wind-up phase. At that point, its cutting power is dramatically lowered. While it is explained later on, one of Yasuke's core skills as a fighter is being able to see the crux of an attack, and that is how he stops Togo's blow. He rushes in early, before the sword can generate the necessary momentum, and he slams his shield near the guard area, since that is the area that moves the slowest and has the least amount of power in a swing. The Russian also reduces the distance and space needed to generate momentum for a proper sword swing. For Togo, it's like trying to swing a baseball bat inside of a locker. He just doesn't have the necessary conditions to take a proper strike. And I love how that makes sense. Sure, it's unrealistic, but I'm happy to allow for some suspension of disbelief so long as it works within the rules that the manga has written for itself. Is it unrealistic for a woman like Fuma Kotaro to exist? In real life, unfortunately so. But that doesn't mean I don't think it's a sick move for her to bend and twist her body to its maximum limits to generate as much force as possible for the world's deadliest shot put performance. Oh, I almost forgot. Hype moments. In Tenkaichi, there are plenty of them, whether it be the softer looking Sasaki Kojiro being represented by this obese bug creature to show just how much of an analytical monster they are, or the act of showing a pillar of stones to show the accumulation of small efforts that have led Jinsuke to fight amongst these monsters, Munenori's Shinigami/Atsura design to show just how much bloodlust he is hiding underneath his everyday facade, or the aforementioned Fuma Kotaro's human centipede aura design, representing something that I'm not entirely sure what it's supposed to be, but it looks sick regardless. Huge props to Kyotaro Azuma and his editor for illustrating this series, because it's honestly one of the best action manga paneling and designs I have seen in a very long time. If you see the thumbnail for this video, I've probably put it as something like genre-defining action. I do believe that's a bit, clickbaity, but I do genuinely believe that when I try to imagine what action manga should strive for, I have Tenkaichi as one that should be considered the baseline for tournament-style action settings. I specify that because I think one of my other recommendations, Sakamoto Days, is my gold standard for action set pieces, with how they do their fights moving from location to location, while Tenkaichi's fights always happen in their specific arena at the time. I don't want to spoil too much of the series, because ultimately this video is meant to be a recommendation. I want more people to read this. The series is getting an anime, so I assume more people will flock to the series when the official trailer is announced. But I think if you have a free afternoon, you will not regret picking up the series. Also, I'm not entirely sure where to place the series on a scale for goriness. I definitely would place it as more gory than your typical action manga. There is body mutilation and a surprising number of beheadings, now that I think about it. So if you're someone who gets a little squeamish when you see too much bloody violence in your battle manga, I don't mean that sarcastically, by the way, I completely understand if you don't pick Tenkaichi up. But I think I've rambled on enough. Tenkaichi has a solid premise with characters who are genuinely positioned to be the protagonist of their own stories, with quality art to match it all. I genuinely recommend the series, and I hope that you'll enjoy it if you decide to pick it up. Hi, if you're still here, thank you so much. Nothing more on Tenkaichi here. I just wanted to say some stuff, but I didn't think it would be appropriate to state it in the middle of the video. If you're here from the Chainsaw Man video, thank you so much. That video did really well. I remember thinking I would be happy if it just got 100 views, so the fact that it's sitting around 13k right now is really amazing. I'm trying to keep up a regular upload schedule. I like talking about my interests. This video just came out really late because the new TFT set came out and I had to attend a friend's wedding. And yes, it's in that hierarchy of importance. But also I have to be careful because I can't let my actual work be affected, and I still have my 4th board exam in March next year that I need to study for. So I don't want to make any hard promises, my apologies, but I will be trying to keep up somewhat of a regular upload schedule. But I really do hope that you guys enjoyed this video, and that's all from me. Cheers.